Hello everybody and welcome to Amphlett Reviews, back with more Japanese deep dive into some funky 70s exploitation cinema for you guys. I'm talking about the 1974's The Transgressor, or the better title which fits to more of the exploitation genre it's going for, The School of the Holy Beast. This was a partial recommendation, but not really, more of an inspired, what is this? Never heard of it. I'm curious. Let me go and find it. I found it. Let's watch it. Let's talk about it. I'd like to give a shout out to a fellow YouTube channel called This Comment Smeals of Death, if I say the name correctly, who is an active commenter on a lot of my Japanese and Hong Kong based videos, who've had great little conversations with in the comment section. So thank you very much. He did a video recently, and most of his channel was actually dedicated to a lot of Japanese cinema in terms of tribute videos and doing scoring and just kind of, I guess, making more of aware of really interesting kind of Japanese films and little tributes to those kind of films in the kind of the same space that I've been watching with the V Cinema collection. And he recently did a video for this non-exploitation genre, which I'd never really heard of, from Japan, by the Toei company. And I found this film because of that video he did, which I didn't know what it was, I never heard of it. And just by down to research purposes, of course, had to go and find it, and led to The School of the Holy Beast. What a title, what a kind of impactful film this is in terms of its cultural ban for most of the, I guess in the UK and most of the kind of the world. The full credit goes to you, my friend, and your video, which led to this one. This is directed by Norifumi Suzuki. If I say that correctly, I do really apologize. A big famous 70s exploitation director, one that I was on my list for quite some time. I have heard about some other movies he has been involved with, especially Sex and Fury, if I'm saying it correctly, which had 2 movies. The first one directed by him, I think the second one was directed by someone else. But I've heard he's done some really cool, excellent, kick-ass women, samurai, yakuza kind of style films. Very exploitation, sexualized movies, of course, from the Toei company during the kind of the mid-70s, and just really kind of big during that time. And I think some of his films have got Blu-ray releases, some have got hard access DVDs, but one that I've not really dived into in terms of this director, and this happens to be directed by him, which is a really good coincidence overall, and one that I was very curious about just by the kind of the synopsis and the kind of the trailer, and I had to find this film, I had to check it out. And being the fact this was during the boom of that kind of mid-70s exploitation kind of period, where Toei company, as discussed within Hanzo the Razor, which I discussed in their videos, and within the Female Prisoner Scorpio discussion within the V Cinema collection, Toei was basically trying to entice audiences to come back to cinemas. TV was a big thing and people had more access to broadcast television and movies on television. So what can you get on the cinema that you can't get on TV? Lots of smut, lots of blasphemous material, sex, violence, and rock and roll. What else do you want? And this film definitely caters to a lot of that material and definitely fits into that kind of mission goal that Toei was doing at the time, and doing a shock factor film, which I think has got a much bigger reputation in terms of its kind of cult status than the film actually is. I'll dive into that as I talk about the film going along. The School of the Holy Beast, it's exactly what it says in terms of its name and its poster and what you think the film is. It is a exploitation or non-exploitation genre-based film, which I haven't really seen much of the space. I've seen other movies outside of kind of Asian cinema. I've seen The Devils, I believe, which is a really famous kind of, non-exploitation kind of, Catholic, really violent, famously edited and banned, chopped down to the bare minimum to what it can get away with. Really kind of shock factor film, which is really well made, really stylistic, and just has some great performances, but just a very kind of film, basically very blasphemous in terms of the kind of the Catholic faith, and has some real kind of deep, dark kind of subject lines going on within the nun side of it in terms of the faith and the priest side of it and the time period that was made in. There are other films that I have seen similar in and out of the religious kind of aspect of being a nun or someone who in faith doing kind of a more highly sexualized kind of take on the material. There are kind of a few films like this, very few and far between here and there. Most of them not easy access, most of them do get edited, most of them are banned, and I think this one definitely falls into that. And there are many articles and many kind of books on the non-exploitation genre, and there are probably quite a few that I have not seen. Now, in terms of the film itself, this essentially is a pink film. It is an exploitation or non-exploitation, produced and made by the Toei company from a famous pink director who's made loads of these films in the space. Artistically well-made films that have a lot of sleaze, a lot of excessive nudity or kind of violence or any kind of things like that. This film features, just from top of my head, a lesbian greenhouse sequence. Who can't do certain things but gets creative with the camera and creative with the imagery to show those certain things. I'll leave it to imagination, to the film itself. You've got whipping, you've got smoking, you've got drugs, you've got fights, you've got a really uncomfortable rape sequence in the film, which is just kind of thrown into the film. You've got acid baths, which gets a bit kind of crazy later on. You've got incest. You've got very blasphemous, very kind of controlling archy of kind of the Catholic faith within Japan. And you've got this bigger kind of conspiracy storyline, which is very much suspiciously like another film called Lady Snowblood, which I'll just leave on the shelf there. So you've got a little bit of that female prisoner Scorpio energy. Essentially is a female prisoner Scorpio film, except within a prison, you've got an abbey instead with a bunch of nuns. And you've got basically the backdrop and the story of our main character, which is from Lady Snowblood. It even has strikingly similar kind of ideas and imagery in terms of the snow, in terms of how she was born, in terms of her revenge story. It's all very much a copy base, which is fine. It's just, I expect it, and funny enough though, the main actress in the film was playing basically the female prisoner character within the new female prisoner Scorpio reboot film they did in the 70s, and she's the main leading star in that. So it makes sense. She brings a lot of that energy in terms of her character, and it's funny enough, you've got the same actress in playing both of these films. She's kind of channeling some of that energy within this film as the main leading character. So essentially you've got Lady Snowblood meets Suspiria in terms of the artistic style, with nuns, exploitation, pink film, and that's essentially what the film is, as all the examples mentioned here. And you get this for a hour and 20-odd minute film, essentially. And as mentioned, this is a very artistic, very stylized kind of film. Gorgeous camera work, great locations, really playful in terms of its kind of editing and its music choices, how it wants to kind of shoot these really gorgeous Japanese women. I'm not complaining. And just really kind of have some interesting kind of sequences, and in terms of its kind of more horror-ish kind of elements towards the second act leading into the third act, how it wants to kind of portray certain characters. I think the film is fine. I think it's got a bigger reputation, cult status than the film actually is. I think it's relatively sort of tame-ish, more than I expected. I thought this film was going to go completely bonkers and off the rails, and the way the film was hyped up, the way the film was kind of talked about within the kind of the banned list, essentially. This is perfectly fine. For the 70s, completely understand in terms of its kind of access and its availability within cinemas only. There's no streaming, there's no DVD, there's no Blu-ray. Within modern day, I think this is perfectly fine. I think 88 are pumping out more of the more edgier films recently, so I definitely would think this one slots nicely into their recent kind of pink kind of movies, exploitation films they're releasing recently. And I think it's a pretty enjoyable film. I think it definitely loses some steam towards the kind of the second act getting to the third act. I think our main leading actress is pretty good. I think the journey we get into is slow going. We kind of try to understand who her character is, why she's doing it. We don't really know much about her until leading into the second act to go into the third act, and then we get the whole Lady Snowblood kind of rip-off storyline. Most of the film is really just kind of a very gorgeous film to really view and watch and go through this kind of journey. This character is basically, at the start of the film, have a night of pleasure, a bit of fun in terms of drinking, and basically saying she's going to a place where a woman isn't a woman, and she's giving herself to her faith and to this kind of Catholic church. And her mission and goal is to find out what happened to her mother, which her mother died in this same abbey, this location where she was born. And she makes some kind of rivals, and there's some kind of really kind of weird hierarchies, and question faith, and blasphemous kind of attitude, and all the stereotypes you would see. Of course, you've got a load of women together, which has women only, doing a lot of lesbian-based kind of content. Joke that all these characters in this film are essentially dropouts and runaways, or as the film mentions, drop out from societies. All these women are quite young, or in their early 20s, and essentially they've got no place to go, or they've burnt all their bridges, or their rich family has sent them to kind of, you know, Catholic to be a nun, or to kind of learn some kind of structure and status and just have a bit of faith into something in their life, or they're all troublesome kind of women, which, you know, all these characters in the films, even the hierarchy kind of women, essentially all fucking hypocrites. They're all sexual deviants. They're all looking at kind of pornography, or drinking, or smoking, or fighting, or doing lesbian acts, doing whipping, shirtless, willing to get naked completely for no reason, stealing money. And you've got a much higher kind of, you know, priest character, I believe, or, you know, whatever you kind of status you want to call him, who is essentially is a rapist who punishes nuns by raping them. It's pretty bonkers. It's pretty outrageous. It doesn't go into anything necessarily supernatural, but it does have some elements of that towards the third act. It has a random acid bath, which I don't care. I'm going to say it straight away. That's pretty random as fuck, and it's pretty awesome. I wasn't really expecting it. I wish it kind of lent into more that side of it. Again, once the film starts to get a bit more going in terms of the reason why this character's here, why she's diving into who the priest character is, I think that's when the film gets a bit more of an energy about it. It starts to get a bit stale towards the second act, and it adds in a random kind of really strange rape scene from basically her friends, which I think is really strange. And it kind of does all the things that you would expect a kind of a pink film to do with the material of being Japanese women within non-clothing. And it gets it all out of the way, gets it all done in the first portion of the film, and then it kind of kicks into the main storyline. I do think there are other movies that go a bit further, or dare to go further. I think that The Devils, for instance, I think was a lot more shocking, a lot more kind of whoa kind of thing in terms of its kind of characters and its material, and definitely amps up some of the violence as well. I think this one is relatively tame. It definitely has some kind of torture-based sequences, definitely some BDSM kind of elements in terms of some of this stuff that's there, and, you know, again, shouting and screaming and just kind of really strange kind of ritual kind of sequences, which, you know, to prove your faith kind of bullshit. And a lot of excessive nudity, of course, in terms of her revenge is very strange. It doesn't really make a lot of sense, if I'm being completely honest, and I think she wastes a lot of fucking time to get to that point, and I think they could have done a lot more with it. It's a bit of a shame, but I think it's enjoyable nonetheless. Probably a lot more shocking in the 70s than it is today, but definitely an interesting kind of piece for sure. And I think this would definitely get a uncut version from the UK 88 film edition down the line for sure. So what are your thoughts and opinions on this film? Please comment down below. Do you recommend any other non-exploitation films that maybe I have not heard of, maybe I've not got good access? Please comment down below. Love to know your recommendations. So meantime, guys, Amphlett Reviews, signing out.